Here, I wasn't. Oh, were you saying something?
Alive, are we?
I was intrigued when you said
Jeffrey, if you're born, once you
Thought
open up the
has,
door a little bit,
like,
and then the whole
that
window.
comes in its energy.
Anybody else? I can.
Just say,
wait.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
You're saying earlier tonight that thought as an energy comes like in sort of waves, and that it gets based on experience can get thoughts like sort of get mapped into that. I mean, I don't know. I'm curious more about that. Like, if you can see, do you see at some level like there's the energy, and then there's like sort of a content sort of sprouting inside of it, or
yeah. Well,
how can you experience that?
It's interesting. It's very interesting, of course. You can experience it by noticing. Probably the most direct and easy way to experience it is notice when you're not particularly thoughtful. Notice how there is still a thought stream.
Right.
That it just isn't really condensed down to sort of discrete thoughts per se. It's just a kind of a subliminal stream of,
Yeah, I've seen that.
And then at certain point it'll pop a threshold, and all of a sudden it'll sort of condense down to a thought per se that has that's really sort of discrete and has a name, or you could actually narrate it and read it, or put it into sound and put it into specific ideas.
Right.
But you can notice that stream that the seemingly discrete thoughts occur in is also occurring spontaneously, even when it's not particularly solidified into chunks, so to speak, or into thoughts per se.
Right.
And then, so by noticing that, you can begin to try to be with the way in which it sort of blooms into these specific, sort of more discrete thoughts proper.
Yeah. And then there's that thing. I've seen that stream that doesn't seem like it has stuff in it, and then I've seen the thing where there's little things popping. I'm kind of aware of what's going on, like related to the example we were talking about before, the spider web. Like, if I'm lying there and I hear like a bird make a noise, I notice that like there's like a flash of like a picture of a bird, and like maybe a flash of like a picture of like of the letters spelling bird.
Sure.
So
all those kinds of things.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things like that, and then there's even like this weird kind of thought memory that I still know what that sound was a second ago, and at that level, there's still a lot of there can be an awareness that like the thought bird isn't the bird, and the flashing bird that I saw in my mind wouldn't look anything like the bird, all that stuff. And then there's this other disturbing level beyond that, where the thing just like expands, and like I'm totally not aware that it's a thought, and then that I'm being completely duped into believing it. And
that's the problem. That's the problematic mode.
Yeah, right.
The unaware mode.
Right. Yeah, it seems super sneaky.
It's very sneaky. I mean, I think that why thought is so seductive and so powerful is that it is actually an expression of the inherent intelligence, which is sort of the preconscious thought, let's call it the preconscious intelligence, which is meaningful. You know what it's kind of like? Imagine, and this is very very metaphorical, but imagine like a matrix of dots, like stars in the sky, deep space or something.
Yeah.
Just these points of light.
Yeah.
Which is analogous to the inherent intelligence. But the inherent intelligence can look at itself and sort of connect the dots hypothetically.
Yeah.
Which is the beginning of sort of early thought, and then it can further take the thought, take the lines that it's hypothesized or projected between sort of seeing patterns, and then it can say, oh, this pattern looks like a such and such, this pattern looks like a such and such, and that's analogous to the actual blooming of a thought proper,
Yeah.
which is imaginary and untrue, but it's based on the actual presence of the dots of light, which are true.
Yeah.
And that's why thought sort of sneaks into the door as true, because it's actually built up on a foundation of truth. The inherent intelligence is true. I don't know. This isn't very precise the way I'm putting it, so I don't know if it's conveying ideas.
Yeah. Well,
But in other words, there is intelligence which is true, which is not conscious thought, and conscious thought is an elaboration or development of that fundamentally true intelligence.
mm-hmm.
So it sort of has some credibility
Right.
because it's built on reality, but it in itself is wholly unreal. So the Big Dipper as a dipper is wholly unreal. The pattern of lines that the supposed Big Dipper is more real because it's a hypothetical connection between disconnected dots, and the dots that are there are actually real.
Right.
They're actually there,
Yeah.
but there are no lines, and the lines are not a dipper.
Right.
So it's sort of two layers of abstraction above the reality, and I think thought
Right.
kind of works the same way.
Oh, yeah. Wait, that's really interesting too. So, there's the level of believing that it's a dipper, and then there's a level of seeing the lines,
Right.
connecting it, and that is analogous to what?
Well, seeing the lines is like the analogous to sort of preconscious thought,
Okay. Okay.
and then having it be a particular thought is analogous to that those lines look like a dipper.
Right.
So you're sort of a second layer of abstraction out of the reality, which is just the energy presence.
Right. I guess that was making me think of this thing that has occurred to me a few times recently, that everything is like white noise, and then,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
like, it's all being like just
nice.
strung together.
Yeah, that's what I'm
out
talking
of that.
about. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. The primal Shakti, the inherent intelligence, is analogous to white noise, or the presence of an infinite field of stars randomly distributed
Right.
in infinite space. And then the imagining patterning is one layer of abstraction, and then deciding that patterning is actually exists as this and that is
Right.
another layer of abstraction.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but being with white noise is a very, very good mode, because that's a good way to accessing the Shakti.
Yeah.
That's what I say is go to the energy, be with the direct energy, the direct presence of your experience. That's the white noise.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about that is that presence is there even if you're piling abstractions on top of it.
Right.
So I can say this is a hand and it's my hand, those abstractions, but the white noise but the presence is still here. So you can undercut all that without needing to turn it off or argue with it or do any tricks. You can just go to the thisness, which is that just the static itself.
Yeah. Right. I also was kind of noticing how the static, like visual static and sound static, like if I kind of go to them at the same time, they seem more indistinguishable than, or more in the same place than.
Yeah. But because they are essentially the same mode, they may have distinguishable qualitative differences, but they also have a fundamental sameness.
Yeah.
I mean, another way of playing with this whole static idea is you can close your eyes and watch just the very fine snow.
Yeah.
Stare for a while. I mean, like do it for like 2 or 3 minutes or even longer to really be in that as presence, and then also open your eyes and see that I'm seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same little field of uncountable little sparkles, but now it has it's showing up as a patterning.
Yeah.
But it's not actually substantially different.
Yeah. Yeah, if I look at any little like square centimeter of it, it's that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All this stuff is fundamentally really easy to explore because it's actually our direct experience, which is right here, right now, always.
Yeah.
And the only reason we don't explore it is we don't bother to think of it, most typically, as in any other terms than the abstractions and the frame of reference of what we're defining everything to be that we usually just take for granted.
Yeah.
So we're stuck in this framework of normalcy of, oh, this is a room and this is a rug and these are people and we're having a stupid conversation.
Right.
Instead of just, wow, but wait a minute. Yeah, okay, there's that, but what's that on?
Yeah.
What is that? What's the substance of that? And all of a sudden, you're in a whole nother thing. You're just with this amazing presence.
Yeah, it's weird because it'll occur to me, a bunch of times a day, this is really fucking strange, and like, what is going on? Why am I here? And like, what is this? And how is anything being experienced? But then, most of the time, it's just like, even though that occurs a lot, it's like totally buying into stuff, like.
Yeah, sure. But that's been your long time framework. So it's a normalcy that's familiar. So you sort of go there, just like the horse going back to the barn. Just because that's where it's used to going.
Right. Yeah. I remember thinking, like when I was a kid, thinking about that stuff a lot, and then it would really bother me, like, how do I know my mother's real and stuff like that, and not just an apparition.
Yeah.
And then, like, no one else seemed to be asking those questions. So then I'm like,
isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? I wondered that too.
Did you do it in class?
In fact, you got into deep shit when you did ask those questions.
No one's asking the important question.
No, sir.
Someone just yell at you.
There were no answers. No.
They didn't know the answers, and that scared the hell out of them.
Yeah. So this protracted period of like, oh, I guess I'll just try to make it in this world.
Me too. We could all say that. Yeah. Me too.
Peter, when you talk about the white light, when I close my eyes, I see white sparkles on a black background. So
Sure.
What's the black part? Black
Well,
background.
Well, look really closely. I think you'll notice there's white sparkles on the black background. Then look at the black background, and actually that background is actually finer, dimmer sparkles that are smaller. And if you look in between those ones, you find even finer, dimmer sparkles that are smaller. And even though it seems at first glance to be sort of brighter sparkles on a dark background, you can't actually find a dark background because when you look at it, you actually find very dim, very fine sparkles. But look for yourself and see if you find them.
It's like a cloud of sparkles.
Yeah. And it has, and there's sort of dominant presences that seem more bright or more discreet. But then you look at those closely, and you can't. And it's not really like that because it's all ultimately indefinable.
Yeah.
But studying the phenomena when you close your eyes visually, very precisely. Don't be with it vaguely or wishfully. Just sort of unbiasedly, like, wow. Let me see if I can see what am I experiencing now in the visual field. And it's very subtle. It's very trippy. You can get lost just right there.
Yeah.
And without any transcendental whatever, just in this very simple presence, the simple fact of this experiential field reveals an astounding subtlety, very obviously so. Just right there.
Well, that's just on the visual level. There's a whole lot of other stuff.
Oh yeah. No, this is.
No, but right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But once you see that sort of the dimensionalities that are just in that simple aspect, then you can notice the other dimensional dimensionality that's in everything else that's also there, so to speak, or here, however you want to put it.
What's interesting is when you look at the visual field like that, and it merges into basically a dream. You see forms,
Yeah, it's
fantasies, and
yeah.
where does it suddenly become a meaningful form? Bugs Bunny, it jumps out.
Yeah, but this exactly reveals this property of consciousness to connect the dots and to move into this kind of abstracting, orientations within this essentially field of noise.
Yeah.
Which is all inherent. It's all intrinsic. It's in the nature of it itself to do this.
Where's Waldo?
He wears Waldo.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like what Dean said, like I also have noticed recently looking at it. There's like these forms emerging, weird faces and like little stories and journals that are all like
Watch it.
there.
Yeah, it can be an intensely visionary experience.
Yeah.
but this reveals the nature of the way this works, that this spontaneously goes into that mode.
Yeah.
This is inherently creative. This is inherently elaborative. It inherently mushrooms on itself.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Are you talking about when your eyes are closed or when your eyes are open?
Both. I noticed it when my eyes were closed. But
When your eyes are closed, you can see it more clearly because when your eyes are open, it tends to follow sort of elaborations, subtle imaginary elaborations of apparent objects and entities you think you're seeing.
Yeah.
Like I'm seeing you and I'm thinking about you and all. But when you close your eyes, there's no you, there's no nothing, it's just a sparkle. So when these things appear, it's more obvious that, wow, it was a cloud and now it's, this bizarre face or whatever.
Right.
Or landscape or...
Yeah, if I pay attention, it's happening now too. Like I'll see looking at you, I see a wall or something.
Oh,
or
yeah.
like
all the
other
time.
things.
In experience all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, one way of understanding this is that all modes of consciousness are happening at once. So
Right.
you're awake now, but you're also dreaming.
Yeah. I didn't know what you meant by that when I
Simultaneously,
first heard you say it.
but the dreaming is typically not noticed so much because
Yeah.
it's a more refined, subtle sort of a textural layer, so that it's an overlay or a substrate of the obvious sensory. So I'm obviously seeing you sitting on the sofa, but at the same time there's all of this sort of associations and
Yeah, I can see
dreams
that now.
and deep sleep is also happening as a layer,
Yeah.
which is just sort of the noise.
I haven't seen that as clearly yet, but yeah. It's cool.
It is. It's very cool. It's fascinating. That this always reveals all aspects of itself in real time. All aspects of reality are right here, right now.
Yeah.
So that's why this is so discoverable. This is so investigatable because it's right here.
Right.
This is not something you need to strive for and aspire to and somehow get to. It's like, no, it's right here. Just look.
It's huge. Like just entertaining the possibility that it's right here and not somewhere else or in a book or.
It is huge. It's huge. I mean, to really get the full implication of that is profound. So the entire metaphysical conundrum is right here for you to investigate. Every aspect of it, and the revelation of it, and the solution. The quote-unquote solution, i.e. simply seeing what it is right here as well. Just to look and see what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's huge. It's profound.
So, Peter, is the dream state the same thing as that visionary place?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So how many aspects of reality are there?
They aren't discrete, so it can't be said. They can't be enumerated.
So then when you talk about aspects, you mean everything that's happening?
Yeah. Everything that's happening which is sort of n-dimensional. In other words, it has as many dimensions as you care to analyze, and each dimension is essentially an aspect, so to speak.
And even calling that is a subtitle.
Yeah, of course. It is what it is.
And I haven't seen more than just this dimension here, which seems to be three-dimensional. And I haven't seen the other.
Well, but there's ideas, that's a dimension.
Right.
There's interpretations, that's a dimension. There's emotionality, that's a dimension. There are dimensions not in a spatial sense, but in a sense of a sort of a realm of quality.
Right, okay.
Thought is right here, but it's not a part of the three space.
Right.
It takes place in its own dimension of quality that is clearly thought.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
And similarly, any other kinds of qualities, intuitions, you can look at it and you can sort of analyze as many of them out as you want. Like how many dimensions are there? Well, as many as you care to look for. It's like it's like asking a question: how many slices can you slice a pie into? Well, as many as you want.
Yeah.
It's just sitting there. Just have at it.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about thought, like what is thought, but it's a bunch of different things.
Yeah, again, you can have it as thought, or you can have it as the myriad aspects of thought, and tease all these different dimensions out of it, and it's all good. It's all valuable. It's all revelatory. But again, all of these different modes of approaching it, remember that the reality is not actually contained in or limited to these modes. These modes are approximations that have value as vehicles of investigation, but ultimately are not true in themselves.
Okay.
And the truth cannot be said. It's just this. It's in toto.
It's in toto.
Yeah, it's the entirety of itself,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
as it is. And all these modes of, well, it's kind of like this, it's kind of like that. Yeah, okay, that's cool. So notice that, and that's great because you're looking at this and being with this more profoundly than perhaps you're used to doing, which is great. That's the vehicle. But where you actually end up transcends or includes your modes of analysis to get at it, but includes infinitely more as well.
Mhm.
Because it is itself.
Right. Yeah, it's good to be reminded to always undermine
Yeah.
thought is something.
So Peter, to digress, so when you're dreaming, do you have a sense, does this reality for you bleed through?
Which reality?
So there's no distinction for you, it's just all...
No distinction.
And they are all going on at the same time for you?
Yeah, sure. Not necessarily with the same insistence. I mean, there's and again, it's hard to pin this down, but there may seem to be sort of certain qualitative sort of things which are more or less in the forefront and less so, but essentially, yeah, it's all just, this never departs from this, but this can look like anything, by which I mean various sort of qualities can seem to be more or less more dominant for arbitrary periods of time or space or whatever. I mean, again, it's sort of hard to pin down exactly what any of that means.
That's true for everyone. It's just
Of course,
that
it is.
not everyone notices. It's true for you.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I've had the reverse. I've had being and having the dream state, but I've never been in the dream state, I don't think, and been aware of anyway.
You know, it seems to me that it's difficult to talk about this because even when you were talking about dimensions, the word dimensions to Susan jumped out, since it's very much in our culture right now to watch go watch a 3D movie as opposed to a 2D movie. The whole idea of dimension it seems to be more about space, and like things have discrete locations and you can graph them out and all that stuff. Modes is maybe a better word, but it's hard to describe any of this in any way.
No, it's not just hard. It's not just hard. It's impossible.
Exactly.
But that's just what I was talking about. All these modes of approaching it and or modes of describing it are ultimately not true,
Right.
not final, and yet they can be valuable as vehicles to investigate it.
Right.
How are they valuable?
They can be valuable as vehicles for discovering this, for investigating this in a more profound way than we're used to being with it.
So breaking out of the frame.
Yeah, exactly so. Leaving normalcy.
It's sort of an alchemy, really, because,
Sure.
it's like, well, to me, cooking is an alchemy, because I can't do it. But it's like adding a little salt in something that's a sweet dish, because it brings out the sweetness. So you never know when a word or a description will trigger for someone seeing something, and suddenly it clicks. And
Well, that's the
So
point.
it can be anything.
That's the point of all of this enterprise
Watching your
here,
cat.
these gatherings, is that these things are all nothing in themselves. All these things that are said, these things that are these presences, whatever, it's just random. But there's the opportunity, the potentiality that something will resonate
Right.
for somebody, and
Right.
you get a little different contact with the reality of your being, which is revelatory, which is the point.
Right.
Is a progressive and ongoingly deeper revelation of yourself to yourself.
Because the difficulty, I think, is that it's something that's really obvious. It's right here. It's not other than what you already do and see and experience and are. But for some reason, you're convinced it isn't. And it's all those years of mentation and subtitling everything that has you convinced that you're not doing, that you're not, it's very funny.
And it's very
But
funny.
none of
When you
that's,
figure it out, it's
but
like,
none of that's ever gonna, none of that's gonna end, with awakening. It's
Nothing-
It's gonna keep
Depends how
going,
you
the
mean.
apparition
Nothing-
will keep going on, right?
Yeah, nothing ends, but you see what it is, and when you see what it is, you see it doesn't
makes
need to end.
all the difference.
Because seeing what it is removes it as a problem.
Right.
Not seeing what it is means it's possible for you to erroneously interpret aspects of it as problematic.
Right.
Right.
And that is what causes suffering, that's what causes confusion, that's what causes a sense of being trapped, that's what causes all these different modes that are painful, essentially.
Right.
When you see what this is, you discover that no aspect of this whatsoever is problematic, and that there is nothing but this, and that you are this, and so obviously, no problems, in capital letters, which is, and since it happens to actually be the case, why not avail yourself of that fact, since it's doable?
It seems to take a lot of convincing.
Well, it may, But again, what it really takes is ripeness, and ripeness comes when it comes. And that can look like arriving at ripeness or entering into ripeness can look like a process of grappling with things or convincing or exploring or whatever degree of turbulence. But in actuality, it's a process that does itself. It's like, like when it's time for the chick to come out of the egg, it'll come out of the egg or die trying. And that's kind of what it's like for us, when we find ourselves beginning to mature, then all of a sudden we're thrashing around and we're pecking at the egg and we're just, we don't know what we're doing, but we're in the transport of a primal force that is taking us somewhere into the unknown.
What's interesting is that it's taking us into being ourselves.
Of course.
Our real,
Of course. Just like the force that makes the chick break out of its egg is taking it to its real self, to a fuller expression of its own inherent nature. What it is.
So Peter, this is sort of from the internet, but then I'm going to co-opt it as mine. You use the term apperception, supposedly. What does that mean?
I don't think I actually have used that term. I use the term perception a lot.
Perception, okay. Because apperception is a philosophical term having to do with consciousness. Kant and Husserl and a lot of existential.
Yeah.
So perception is probably what they've been hearing.
Yeah, I personally don't use the word apperception, mainly because I'm not sure exactly what it refers to.
Right.
Just semantically.
Yeah.
But I use the word perception a lot. You might hear it might be heard as apperception because I'm a sloppy speaker. But but that very question is profound. It's a koan. What is perception? Well, it's in one sense it's very self-evident. Perception is this that is happening right here. Okay, good. So what is it? It's like, yeah, answer that question. That's the big one. Answer that question.
But
what
you
is
don't.
perception?
That's good.
The comedic version. We need to have the comedic satsang spoof.
Well, that's what I think that's great about this satsang is a lot of it is just doesn't have anything to do with what the words are anyway.
Well, that's the point. Because words don't go very far, and if you're just staying with words, you're not being very
But
deep.
to the extent that we do have to use words and communicate, there's very little jargon. I don't feel like I've had to be a spiritual seeker for 20 years to,
Sure.
Hey, you came up with apperception.
Well, that's, yes. I co-opted that.
First jargon I'll find.
That's from
I mean, words can
from
be,
Philosophy 101 or something.
words can be used in a sense to try and understand a concept, but they can also be used, well, in zillions of ways. But one way, for example, would be to use it to move through a kind of way of experiencing or being.
Sure.
Literally walking through it.
Yeah.
They're like little carriers that are carrying the energy along sometimes.
Well, they are, because remember, words are not actually conceptual.
Right.
Words are spontaneous energy phenomena. Words are embedded in and are phenomena of the inherent intelligence. So words are absolutely mysterious and miraculous, and the way intelligence employs words and even employs concepts as embodying meaningfulness is completely miraculous. It's inconceivable. There's no way to get a handle on what that is. So even though we frequently model the challenges and the difficulties of all this conceptualization and the confusion that we typically have in relating to it erroneously, at the same time, this very phenomena itself is directly a display of this astoundingness that we are looking at, that we are investigating, that we are noticing more profoundly. So there's no reason you can't use words and concepts to approach reality, because they are made of reality, they are symptoms of reality, they are wholly creatures of reality, so it's connected.
And you can, with that, you can start to play.
Exactly, sure.
You just, like,
Yeah.
really.
Because wherever you go, you're in this. You never depart from this. So you can go anywhere within this with impunity and still be relating to this, with this, in novel ways.
The whole thing.
And it's not precious. It's not like you need to approach it this way. You need to be in silence. You need to be meditating. You need to be in equanimity. It's like, no, any mode whatsoever that you approach that shows up doesn't depart from this and is an expression of this, so therefore is a viable vehicle of this and to this, of this to itself, because that's what it substantially is already. I mean, anything that happens is literally, this is vehicle to itself. This is exploration of itself, because that's the sole event that's actually happening here, is reality looking at itself, reality exploring itself. And anything that shows up is simply a symptom of that. Anything whatsoever, anything. No holds barred. No sacredness. Or you could say nothing but sacredness. Better yet.
Well, that's what, maybe that's why it always has this perfect balance or inherent.
Yeah, of course.
Because, even that which is seeking to know itself is one thing.
Exactly.
So
And what it's seeking to know is itself, and it doesn't depart from itself in that investigation. So there's no wrong turns.
Yeah.
I mean.
So where does that term "no holds barred" come from?
Wrestling, I think.
I see.
Or boxing
I
or
get it
something.
now, yeah.
In other words, a no holds barred wrestling match is one where there's no rules. Just have at it.
Right.
Have at it. The foul will not be called. Wreak as much damage as you can
Hit
manage.
below the belt if you wish.
That's right.
In case you're interested, the apperceive by the dictionary or apperception is perceive in terms of a past experience. So apperception is the process whereby perceived qualities of an object are related to past experience, which is how the whole subtitle dialogue thing started to begin with.
Yeah.
See the little face in the middle? That's you, Lily.
If we could only abolish that word, we'd
Before
be
you know
okay.
it, you see again. You start at you start going back and back and back till you've got this humongous pyramid of
We have the whole world. And history and
what a nuisance it is.
The religion of the anti-apperception.
anti-apperceptionists.
Anti-apperception.
Anti-apperceptionists unite.
Okay, so that means apperceptive is able to relate new precepts to past experience. Who wants to do that?
Oh, it's okay.
I mean,
If they're
About
not
99% of
free.
humanity.
there is that. There is that. That's a good word.
I can give an example of that. Your word Toto. Toto is the name of Dorothy's dog.
I know when you said that,
Who
Toto.
revealed
I
the
mean,
true nature of the
Little bit of
wizard.
Spanish.
That's right. That's right.
It's a really good
Toto
rock
revealed the
group,
wizard.
too.
Toto.
Toto. In Toto.
In Toto.
In Toto. Not as Dorothy and Toto, just in Toto. It's big! Much bigger than Toto.
Toto popped the bubble.
And dog is God backwards.
There, oh my God.
Yeah. We've hit it now.
We're getting Kabbalistic now.
That's good. I like that. Wow, that's a good one. I like that. I'm going to play with that one. I just have to look what Dorothy means.
I'm more interested in who wrote that, if he's an alchemist. Like Lewis Carroll.
Must means, also means dot.
Boy, they're really off somewhere to know about that.
Hey, it's right here.
It's good. Wide-ranging. Freewheeling. No holds barred.
There
We can go anywhere. We can do anything.
In the center ring, we
We
have.
can violate any laws.
you go. And we do continually.
Peter, when you talk about whatever mode shows up, what do you mean by that? Whatever mode shows up.
Whatever seems to be happening, or whatever seems to be happening as, or in the system of, or anything that seems to be any certain way whatsoever is a mode.
So then even the fantasy that's happening could be a mode.
Of course,
of
it's basically, absolutely it is a mode. Of course it's a mode.
But that's all a mode.
What do you mean?
That's a reach.
Yeah.
It's the,
Ice cream on
it's
top
the
of
Julia
cake.
Child metaphor coming in yet again.
Would you say
Sorry.
you say a mode of something?
Her birthday's tomorrow.
Whose?
Julia's.
But this is, you can't say what this is, but this spontaneously presents itself as if you could, maybe.
Right.
And that's all modes.
Okay.
And any potential narrative of what this is a mode. Of like, oh, we're here sitting in this room having a conversation is a mode. Oh, this is radiant presence in consciousness is a mode. Oh, there's vortices of energy that are dynamically interacting and dancing is a mode. You know, oh, it's a spectrum of infinite dimensional textures is a mode. I mean, in other words, any way this kind of seems to be as a sort of a system or a parasystem.
Could it
is
be
a
also the memory?
Oh,
of
sure,
past
absolutely.
experience?
Oh, absolutely. Memory is a major mode.
Okay.
And memory also generates modes.
Memory also generates thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
So that would be a mode.
Well, thought itself is a mode. Yeah, sure.
But what about the content of thought? Is that
Also a mode, sure.
So then everything.
Yeah,
Everything's excluded.
anything that seems to be describably a certain way is a mode, and all modes are not actually what they seem to be.
Okay.
But it's the nature of this to tend to generate modes, to tend to look like modes. That's one of the most, probably one of the more subtle things you learn in learning to really be with this completely, openly, and nakedly in realization, is that it is constantly throwing up these modes.
Right.
And it never stops. Its nature is to generate modes. So it seems to be this and seems to be that. And seems, which is analogous to the thoughts that pop into our head. We're just like, you're sitting here and all of a sudden you just have some bizarre thought or some bizarre emotion or something. And that's just a mode that this is spontaneously appearing as. But none of these modes are true in the sense that this is always completely more and other than any mode it seems to be presenting itself as. And yet it generates these modes the way a sparkler generates sparks. It's just constantly shooting off all of these modes, which we're all very familiar with in our experience, right? It's just we're sitting here and it's thinking that, feeling this, feeling that, fantasizing that, daydreaming that, hallucinating that. There's this absolute dynamism of sort of disconnected little trajectories of semi-coherence that sort of dissipate, and then there's two others replace them, and so on, right? I mean, this is just what experience looks like. And it continues to look like that. And when you have a more naive understanding of sort of spiritual presence, you may think of these modes as a problem and trying to shut them off and trying to get beyond them to, some core reality.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, the core reality, spontaneous nature, is to appear as these modes. It's like trying to get to the sun and saying all this damn sunlight's in the way. But the sun is the sunlight. The sun is that which makes the sunlight. The sunlight is a revelation of the sun. And likewise, all of these modes are like the creative resonance of this itself. And even though they do not fully capture this, they are evidence of it, and they are revelations of it. And these modes never stop. I mean, being with reality is like having a fire hose squirting you in the face forever.
Nice.
No wonder I want to jump.
I'm all wet.
Because this is so radiant, and that radiance spontaneously coalesces into visions, sort of into this or that or whatever, and that is intrinsic. That never stops. That is reality.
But
reality.
that you that's getting the fire hose changes somehow. It feels like it's not getting hurt.
Oh yeah, there's no hurting involved.
Yeah, so there's nothing to. There's no reason.
Well, that happens fairly early on, but a more subtle thing is there's still, even when there's no hurting, there's still no stability, and there's a presentation of constant contradiction.
Right.
It constantly presents contradictory versions of itself, unendingly. And that can be seen as like a problem. It's like, wait a minute, no, let me sort this out. But that itself is a misunderstanding, because these presentations of contradictory views of itself are the very essence of its primary mode, the primary radiance.
But Zen teacher once told me that monkey mind was, is like the boogeyman or something, and you got to calm that down.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Meditation.
Yeah, not true.
Yeah.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Doing that is valuable as a vehicle for exploration, but the whole point of that experiment is to discover you don't need to do it.
Yeah.
You get free of monkey mind not by stopping it, but by discovering that there's no target of monkey mind. There's no you that is entangled in monkey mind. Monkey mind is just this unending radiance that in reality inherently consists of. And so many spiritual paths have this, clumsily and I think ultimately inaccurately, where there's some preferred condition that you get to by departing some lesser condition. And in actual fact, all the lesser conditions are the creations of absolute reality
It's so
itself.
weird because they somehow they say that same thing where, oh, it's all okay, but I mean, really behind
But they still.
the belief behind the thing is that there is an enlightenment to get to.
Right, which is not true. I mean, it's paradoxical. In a certain sense, there is an enlightenment to get to, but the enlightenment to get to is the discovery that there's just this, which has always been, and so there's no enlightenment to get to. But discovering that is arguably enlightenment.
Reality spins out all these weird religions.
Oh, it spins out endless weirdness, yeah.
Misleading.
All of these,
Subtly misleading.
because
stuff.
all of these modes that it spins out are all partial. And if you latch onto any one of them, you're lost. This is that spits out all modes and any modes, not any particular mode.
Reality likes to wrestle with itself.
It loves to.
No.
That's
No,
that's
it's all about-
its very nature.
Loves to do that.
But even if you latch on to any mode or apparition, I mean, the discovery that you're latching on is freedom.
Sure. Seeing it, seeing what it is. it's not that you need to not latch onto. You need to see. Seeing is the only real powerful act, is to see what it really is as it's happening. See the actual event. Not to stop the actual event or control it or not do it, just see it.
Right, so whatever is happening, I mean, if you're getting seduced into that apparition or you're apparent reality or whatever's happening, if you get seduced into it, if you see that, you know, you're just kind of like an actor on a stage, then that's freedom right there, right?
Right.
For sure, of course.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then you're really nice about it to yourself, because you go, well, you know, that's what it says in the script at the moment.
Yeah,
That's right.
Either that or you're totally wild and crazy, which
Who the heck-
is usually my case.
Who the
You're
heck-
out living
Or
like an idiot.
in the words of Roger Rabbit, I'm not really bad. I'm just drawn that way.
You know, the metaphor of the monkey mind is very appropriate, because how much validity would you give to a monkey yakking away in the tree somewhere, and how much would you try and bother to get rid of it? I mean, it's just a little monkey. So in a way, if you think of your monkey mind literally as this little monkey, you just go whack or whack or whack. That's all it's doing. I mean, when I catch myself going on and on about something, whether it's somebody who cut me off on the highway or whatever, I just think whack, 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 because it's what it is. It's this little monkey just going off, you know, as I go, fine. The dog's barking, you know, whatever you want, however you want to refer to it, it's really not that important.
I like monkeys.
Well, see, she likes her monkey mind.
It seems like it's weird because as I become more sort of comfortable with stuff, the annoying stuff seems to not be happening as much. Like, there seems to be fewer people cutting me off or being assholes or like messing with me or something like that.
Yeah. Well, there's a certain way in which you, as you become more integrated with the presence of the flow of reality, you also encounter a more spontaneously sort of smooth functioning.
Yes.
It's like your functioning becomes more deeply grounded in the inherent intelligence, which is doing everything anyway, so it all kinds of tends to work itself out less frictionfully.
Yeah.
Or let's say more frictionlessly.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I was trying to work with getting angry in traffic. Like, it was even before I think I started to come here, and like as I was working with it, it just seemed like to not be like happening, that people were doing annoying stuff to me.
Nice.
And I was probably not doing annoying stuff to them.
Yeah,
Which was probably part of the situation.
Yeah.
Well, I think you can't go about anything by thinking you can fix a problem, because there are no problems. It's just seeing that there are no problems,
Yeah.
and suddenly there aren't any problems.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, yeah.
That sounds
was my
weird, but
experience
it's...
of it.
But that's a discovery. I mean,
Sure, it is a
it's
discovery.
like
Huge
you know,
discovery.
yeah,
It is.
Working on it.
Yep. It just seems to kind of happen gradually, you know.
Well, it happens. It happens
Yeah,
as it happens.
Noticing this discovery that
Yeah.
this is just what's happening. This is what's being
Mm-hmm.
spun out
Mm-hmm.
by reality,
Yes.
and that just seems to be a gradual awakening.
Yes.
Related to that, I feel like I get this glimpse that there's like some kind of energetic holding or like painful suffering or contraction
Mm-hmm.
that's there, and then but then it just doesn't need to be there. It's just there,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost seems like an instant it could just like vanish or something, or not, and or it could just be like a gradual loosening of something.
Well, ultimately, seeing it removes it as an issue, whether it dissipates, whether it vanishes, whether it reveals itself as other than itself,
Right.
whatever. It's however you interpret what happens. Nonetheless, seeing affects the solution
Yeah.
to all of these holdings,
Mm-hmm.
because these holdings are predicated on falseness, and seeing removes falseness.
Right.
So the holdings cease to be existing as holdings. Whether they actually
Yeah.
cease to exist or whether they just reveal themselves as non-holdings is a moot point.
Yeah. Right. There's even a belief that there's holdings, and there's a
Sure.
belief that they're
Right,
Yeah.
and they're based on beliefs
right.
about
Yeah, but again, it sort of trying to pin down exactly what the mechanism is irrelevant, because it's really just it's more about engaging. The seeing is the solution, and how that happens or what the mechanism is, if any, is irrelevant.
Yeah. Right.
So it really is a change in perception.
It's
Or
it's a discovery of what perception actually is.
Real perception.
So which is arguably a change, but it's arguably not a change, because perception has always been what it will always be, but it doesn't necessarily recognize what it is. It has a misconception of itself. So it's seeing what it is, and yet at the same time it feels like a change,
Yeah.
because it has when you discover what it really is, you discover it's this astounding richness that you weren't aware that it was previously, which feels like a change in terms of the sort of feeling tone of it.
Right.
And yet, in actual fact, it is what it always is. We just hadn't recognized it.
So, all of these different philosophies that are out there, is there any one that is that can explain it like the way that you have explained it, in terms of this is, reality, and that this is all
Only two that I know of,
Dzogchen.
which is Dzogchen and Kashmir Shaivism. And but there's a caveat there, because you have to understand what they really are, and most popularizations or presentations of them are more or less incomplete or partial, or not very sharp. Or let's say not
But this
ultimately
is
sharp.
good. I mean, what you're teaching is a good preparation or homework for studying Dzogchen, right?
Sure. Well, it's one I'm teaching Dzogchen
This is the
essentially.
advanced courses.
This is Dzogchen without the terminology and without the philosophical framework.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the fact of Dzogchen.
Yeah, it's the other way around.
And then Dzogchen proper is this same understanding couched in terms of Tibetan philosophy with the Buddhist background.
Yeah.
Makes it all confusing.
Well, it may make it a little less accessible,
Yeah.
because Dzogchen is fundamentally about real-time experience.
Right.
And so you don't really need all the philosophy and the background and the culturalization and the technical terms. Once you get that, you can just, well, here's this experience here, let's check it out.
Yeah.
Which is the essence of Dzogchen.
Yeah.
And all that Dzogchen supplies us other than that is a few hints and tidbits and a sort of a framework of understanding that, you might look at this experience in terms of a few notions, i.e. that it doesn't depart from itself, that it is itself, that it is everything, and that you are it, and everything is it, and a few things like that, all of which are basically ways of making it loop back on itself, so that so you avoid the pitfall of spinning off into something.
The problem with most religions, though, that is in order to make it, to package it so that it can be taught to multitudes of people by so-called representatives who may or may not get it, you're caging it in words that then get misrepresented or get misunderstood innocently.
Sure.
So it's not something that can be learned necessarily from a book unless you do extensive years and years of looking into it. But the same could be said of mystical Christianity. Christianity, in its mystical form, lays out reality like in a layout, like a blueprint.
Sure.
But unless you know what you're looking at to begin with, you might misrepresent it, and it gets misrepresented. Look at Christianity, for goodness sakes.
Well, the basic fact is that truth cannot be popularized, because you cannot be with this subtly and intimately until you are at a certain point of maturity, which it seems, at least at more or less in this era or whatever, that the majority of human beings don't seem to be really engaging with their experience that way.
Nor do
So-
they wish to.
Well, that's what I mean.
No, because
you know.
hypnosis of all
Well, whatever.
the apperception.
For whatever, you can't really,
Is
you know, it's sort of hard to try and understand why, but it is the case that is so. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Dzogchen was a secret tradition up until very recently, not as a way of generating elitism, but because it was recognized that there's no point telling everyone about this stuff because most people would misunderstand it at best, or be confused even worse at worst. So, you know, so why bother?
Or even worse than that, spread it
And,
out with
and we
interpretation.
see this in all religions. Is, you know, you get an original, you know, a realized being, say a Buddha or a Christ or you know, and anybody, and as soon as their ideas get popularized and promulgated and translated into words that for the masses and all that, you end up with a whole bunch of confusion and a big social hierarchy and a power structure and manipulation and essentially enslavement of masses and so on and so forth, which has absolutely nothing to do with the original fact of a realized being trying to share, you know, the realization with a few people who might possibly click with it. You know? But this is the nature of the beast. You know, it has been ever thus. So.
Peter, I have one more question before we get to the 9 o'clock mark.
Yes.
Tarot is a explanation of the alchemy that's happening in reality. Right.
Yeah, tarot is a very sophisticated and subtle mapping or framework to understand the structure of reality.
What makes it
It is
beautiful
not 100% accurate. It is not reality itself, but it is very intelligent, very sophisticated, and very subtle, which makes it especially valuable as these things go.
I think the beauty of it is that it's pictorial. It does not have subtitles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
You really have to see.
Well, tarot is essentially non-conceptual.
Right.
It's not a logical structure.
But does it lay out the system of reality and what's happening?
It maps a version of the system of reality without 100% accuracy, because that cannot be done.
How much accuracy is it?
It can't be quantified.
78.2.
Did you get a good answer the last reading?
But you don't know which 27.
It can't be quantified, but it's a good jumping off point to look at reality.
It's like a really good
Its real advantage is that it is about reality. So in studying it, you are seduced into looking at the reality. So it's sort of like it's like
the motions of reality, perhaps. You know, the
Yeah.
movement.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's a version of that, but it's not comprehensive or accurate.
Well, what would it need to be?
It's like a depiction. It's like a play. It's like a play depicting the revolution of America in 1776 with modern actors and a modern script. It's not the event itself. It's not accurate, but it's a depiction of the event, which is sufficiently intelligent and nuanced to be interesting and valuable as a vehicle for engaging with the actual event.
Right. So that's consistent with what you say, that you can't know reality, right?
You can't know it analytically. You can't define it. You can know it.
Well, I mean, you can't depict it, which is tarot
Yes.
trying to is
Exactly
a
so.
vehicle to depict it.
As far as you can depict reality, tarot does a pretty good job.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you can't depict reality. So.
You can only be reality.
Yes. Anyway, on that note, good night, everybody.